I'm Keepface and I finally got around to building my R1 Ikki68 Aurora Charcoal. Now I've missed a boat on this one for sure, as I've had the keyboard on my shelf for quite some time since the group buy shipped out, but stick around, it's worth a watch for those of you who have got the Ikki68 R2 group buy, which is shipping out in April, and for those of you that might be interested in the Wuque Studios Mammoth 75, for which the group buy starts tomorrow, which is Friday the 14th of January, and that will be delivering in July. In this video, we'll look at the DIY kit contents, my chosen build and theme, including the stab, switches and keycaps that I went for, a very quick build guide because this will probably help you guys that have got the R2 on the way, because from what I understand that's a very similar build. I'll do an ASMR tour of the keyboard including a sound test, and then I'll just share my personal thoughts and opinions on the keyboard. So in your dark grey padded storage case you should find the following if you purchase the charcoal version like I did. So the first item is the dark grey translucent case. So obviously the top and bottom sections they have, or the top section at least, has got brass inserts for the screws for clamping the case together, and then there's some screw holes in the bottom part of the case as well for the weight. You also get the default gold badge with waves and the magnetic badge base, which is used to connect it to the top case. The hot swappable multi-layout QMK PCB, the black aluminium plate, the silicone dampening pad for the case with two removable sections. These are for the optional weight and battery with the Bluetooth version. There's the silicone dampening pad for between the plate and the PCB. There's one set of silicone gaskets with two spares. There's one set of pour-on gaskets with two spares there, the softer option than the silicone. There's two logo chips for the RGB shine through on the case. One is pre-cut with the Wuque Studio logo and one is uncut for you to do whatever you want with it. There's a pretty decent coiled cable in a braided sheath, and then it also says online that there should be a spare set of LEDs, diodes and sockets, and the rubber feet for the keyboard. I have the screws necessary for the build from another bag, but none of the spares mentioned above there. No LEDs, no diodes, no sockets and no rubber feet. I contacted mykeyboard.eu where I got the keyboard from, and they are sending out the missing parts ASAP, so that's not so bad. So for my build I wanted to go with a black and white theme. For this theme I went with a set of Wuque Studios translucent charcoal stabilizers with a black wire from My Keyboard EU. These were on group buy at the same time as the keyboard itself. Next I went for a set of Tecsee Oreo linear switches with a 55 gram actuation weight and a 63.5 gram bottom out weight. These are beautiful switches that are extremely good in their kind of stock format with no lube. The double spring seems to eliminate spring ping, I think, but they're also donut dipped on the bottom to eliminate any rattle between the bottom of the spring and the bottom housing. I used the keyboard with stock switches for a while, then decided to lube them because I could see there was definitely room for improvement, but there was no need to switch film these switches in my opinion, so I've not done that. Obviously the main factor for getting these switches was the look of them. Black and white go perfectly with black and white keycaps, which I'm coming on to now. So the keycaps I went with are ePBT black and white keycaps, which are perfectly complemented by those Oreo switches. I will say that I am disappointed with the legends on these keycaps. The weight of the characters is all over the shop and the R key is an absolute abomination in my opinion. And then obviously, while very cool, the gold plate did not fit into my black and white theme, so all as I've done with that is I've coloured it black with a Sharpie. It actually looks pretty cool and just then fits in with the theme of the keyboard. So next we move on to the build guide. So for anyone new to mechanical keyboards or DIY kits who might find it a bit daunting building a keyboard like this, there is absolutely no need to fret as it's very easy. I've put a link in the description below to the Wuque Studios build guide for the R1 for if you prefer written instructions. Otherwise, here is my short build guide. Now that I've done the build a couple of times, I would recommend a slightly different order to the website, which is to prepare the case before the plate and PCB. But obviously this is just a preference thing. It makes much more sense to me to have the case ready first, so as you can just drop the PCB and plate assembly straight in as soon as you finished assembling it. But you might see it differently to me. That's fine, do it whichever order you feel is best. So before starting the build, it's worth modding and lubing your stabs and switches. If this is part of your build, this is a messy job and one to get out of the way before you start building and assembling in anger, in my opinion. Once you do have those done, like I say, the first thing I wanted to do was case preparation. So first we'll completely prepare the case ready for installation of the PCB and plate. So first off, as soon as you take the case out of the box, install the feet on the bottom case. You obviously need to do this at some point anyway to stop your keyboard sliding around during use, but it's also important to do it first thing, because when you're assembling the keyboard and it's sliding around while you're assembling it, if you haven't got the feet on there and you haven't got a pad or a mat down, then obviously you could start scratching the back of the case. So that's just first job, straight out of the box, feet on. Second is to install the dampening for your build in the bottom case. It's already all in there. At least mine came with the main bottom pad in there, and then the insert for the weight, and then the insert for the battery. But obviously if you're running a battery or a weight, then you just need to take those inserts out ready for when you put the battery in shortly. So yeah, basically just set up the pads in the bottom case how you need them based on what you're putting in there in terms of batteries and weights. So third is to install the gasket chips and the chosen gaskets in the bottom case. The gasket chips are just the plastic inserts that you can slide in and out around the case, just to quickly remove those gaskets to give it a different feel if you want. So all as you're doing is you're sticking on your gaskets that you've chosen onto those. Obviously the pouring is the softer option and the silicone is the more firm option. Next up is to install the gaskets in the top section of the case. So this gasket mounted case, obviously it clamps in on the plate from either side, so as it's completely gasket mounted instead of it just resting down on gaskets and being pressed in by something hard. There's gaskets either side, so just don't forget to put those top gaskets in to correspond with the bottom gasket setup that you've got. And then just install the badge base, which is 2 screws. Just screw it in place on the top case there. This is the case ready to go, so set it aside with the large brass screws for assembly later on. So next up for me was PCB and plate assembly. When assembling the plate and PCB, you have the option of running standoffs between the plate and the PCB. You can go without them and just sandwich the silicone pad between the plate and the PCB if you're planning to not use them, so it's up to you which way you go. So I recommend that you assemble the plate on a microfiber cloth or silicone pad or something soft to prevent damage in the PCB. So first off, you install the pre-assembled screw-in stabs on the PCB ready for testing and tuning later on. Then I screwed in the standoffs into the underside of the plate. Before laying on the silicone pad on the back of the plate there, when you're using the Bluetooth version, you first need to cut off this little sort of tab here so as you can get to the Bluetooth switch. Next, you place the silicone pad over the standoffs and check that the raised pieces on the top side of the pad are penetrating the slots in the plate, so as it's all nice and aligned. And then with or without the optional washers, secure the PCB to the plate by installing the screws through the back of the plate and into the standoffs. So next is to test the stabilizers. What I did was I put a switch in each of the 4 corners and then obviously 5 switches into all of the stabilized positions for testing. At this point, you're obviously able to test the stabs with the plate and PCB assembled, as they will be in the case, only with just, the majority of the switches missing. And then, it only takes a couple of minutes to take it apart from this point again. You can obviously not bother screwing stuff together, but for me, it takes a couple of minutes and it makes it as close to as possibly can be to when it's all fully assembled. So this is the way I did it. Once you're happy with the stabs, install all the switches, and finally don't forget to slide the logo chip in place between the plate and the silicone pad. So with the case prepared and the PCB and plate all assembled and ready to go, you're ready to assemble the keyboard. So first up, if you're using a battery, obviously you want to connect that to the PCB in a good position for then flipping the PCB over and installing it into the case. Next, you then flip over the PCB and plate assembly and place it into the case. Start with the top edge of the PCB to get the USB-C port sort of located in the right place, then bring in the bottom. Then you need to use a little bit of pressure just to land the PCB deeper in the case and make sure the screw holes line up with the cutouts in the plate. Place the top case on and flip over the keyboard. Obviously make sure that you're still using a microfiber cloth or something for this. And then what you want to do is you just want to loosely start all the screws, then running in a crisscross alternating pattern, begin to close the top case into the bottom case. By doing this, you compress the gaskets evenly, a little bit at a time. Tighten the screws a little each time, and it should take you around something like 3 goes on each screw to fully tighten and bring the top case down evenly. And you want to just monitor the case gap and the tightness of the screws while you're doing this, just to make sure you're not pinching anything or damaging anything. Once that top case is tightened down then onto the bottom case, you flip it back over and install your chosen keycaps. And then just to finish off the build, install your magnetic badge. Right, so next up I'm going to do you a little ASMR tour and the kind of final sound test with the stabs and switches lubed with Krytox 205 grade 0. So that was my build. I'm pretty glad with how it turned out, and I really like the kind of theme that I went for, the black and white theme I went for. I'm really happy with it, and I really like the Oreo switches as well. I think they're great. While €155 is not cheap by any stretch, this keyboard would be considered a good quality entry-level gasket mount keyboard with a hot swappable PCB. For me, it's leagues better than the cheaper €80 to €100 hot swappable budget keyboards you'll find on Banggood, AliExpress or Amazon. Well worth the extra €50–60. In fact, it's not really any comparison to be made there. But on the note of budget keyboards similar to this, I would say check out the EPOmaker 60 Lite on Kickstarter. I don't know if it's any good or not, but it's well worth a look at €80 or €90, and we might see some bigger layouts if they have some good reviews for this one, and this one is a gasket mount keyboard as well. But obviously back to this keyboard, I need to do some more testing with the gasket mount system, but to be honest, this wasn't really the main driving factor for me in buying this keyboard. I just really like the style of the layout, and I had a very clear vision for the build that I wanted to do, like, straight away. In addition to that, I definitely feel like this keyboard is very good value for money. There's lots of dampening pad options, lots of options in terms of changing the feel of the gasket mount system, and some little niceties like the shine through chip and the magnetic plate. All round, it's just a nice little kit with these little extras. I will just touch on the two things that I don't really like, and they are the lack of a battery when ordering the keyboard and the placement of the Bluetooth wireless switch. I would really like to see batteries included in this keyboard, in the Bluetooth version of the keyboard, and I don't really think it's right to call it the wireless version without one. For me, it's just a bit misleading, even though it's clear it's not included. I mean, any other time you buy a wireless keyboard, it comes with a battery, no questions asked, so I just don't think that it's a particularly good thing that they do it like this. I know shipping batteries adds some extra cost and sort of hassle with logistics, but other keyboard manufacturers do it without issues, and I think we'd all happily pay the extra €10 to get a battery included. And then the second thing was the wireless switches under the spacebar. So the spacebar has to come off every time you want to switch the Bluetooth, wireless mode on and off. I guess it's no biggie if you will only use the keyboard in Bluetooth mode or in wired mode, but for people like me who use a different keyboard most days, it's a real pain in the butt to have to take off the spacebar switch every time you want to switch the keyboard on and off. Real pain in the butt is probably a bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. Just stick the switch somewhere where you can actually get at it. Okay folks, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and I'll catch you in the next one.